We're going to call this meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This meeting complies with the Open Public Meetings Act. Notice of this meeting has been published in the appropriate newspapers and posted on the municipal bulletin board and website.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Bresci. Here. Mr. Hyman is absent. Dr. Hofstein.
Here.
Mr. Hudak. Here. Ms. Parnez. Here. Ms. Rosal. Here. Mr. Martins.
Here.
Mr. Such is absent. Ms. Bradley.
Here. Ms. Cipriani, I believe we have resolutions this evening.
Yes, Madam Chair, we have one. This is the resolution of the Zoning Board of the Township of Jackson, County of Ocean, State of New Jersey, authorizing a 2-year extension of preliminary and final major subdivision approval for property located at Frank Applegate Road, Block 4402, Lot 73.
Okay. I need a motion and a second, please.
Second.
Okay, Ms. Hudak.
We have a motion and a second.
Ms.
Roll call,
Parnaz.
please.
Mr. Bresci.
Yes.
Dr. Hofstein.
Yes.
Mr. Hudak.
Yes.
Ms. Parnez. Yes. Ms. Rosal.
Yes.
Ms. Bradley.
Yes. And do we have minutes this evening?
Yes. For August 21st, 2024 meeting.
If you were
From
not
Elizabeth
on the
Rammer.
board in August, please abstain.
Same.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Bresci. Mr. Hyman is absent. Dr. Hofstein.
Yes.
Mr. Hudak.
Yes.
Ms. Parnez. Yes. Ms. Rosal.
Yes.
Ms. Bradley.
Yes. Do we have any vouchers this evening, Elizabeth?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay. And any announcements this evening, Ms. Cipriani?
Yes, number one on the agenda, Avenue or Ave Partners LLC, which had been carried multiple times. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong one?
Wrong agenda.
Oh, my gosh. Thank you. Sorry, let me reject those agendas. So some of that was correct. Number one on the agenda, Tracy Place LLC, which has been carried from November 6th, 2024 and January 15th, 2025, is being carried again, but I don't see the new date.
It's April 16th.
April 16th.
April 16th with no additional notice.
Can we apply the 3-delay rule to that one as well, if it's not heard on April 16th?
Yes, and I think we should provide notice to them of our intention to do so. And I'll, just because I'm new, is that usually done through the zoning office or through the attorney?
I believe Mr. Murphy did them in the
Okay.
past.
Then I will do so.
All right. We need to swear in our professionals.
Please raise your hand, and do you swear that the testimony you're going to present to this board will be the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And please state your name and position.
Mark Romeyer, Board Engineer.
Below, Assistant Zoning Officer.
Stephen Mazer, Conflict Board Traffic Engineer.
Thank you. I don't believe we're having an executive session this evening and no matters for discussion, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so we're going to move on to application number 2, Cardinale and Jackson Crossing number 2, Adventure Crossing amended preliminary and final site plan 776-6, Phase 1, C, D, E, and F, Mr. Hudak has recused himself from this application, so we have to take notice that we have six board members.
And please let the record reflect that Mr. Hudak has left the dais.
Mr. Alfieri, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. Salvatore Alfieri, Cleary, Giacobbe, Alfieri, and Jacobs on behalf of the applicant. This is Phase 1 of the Adventure Crossing project, amended site plan approval. It has received prior approvals, which we'll get into momentarily. I have to apologize in advance. Last month, you were here to hear Phases 3 and 4, and Mr. Borden went through a long, elaborate history of the approvals. Unfortunately, since this is a new application, we have to have a record set again, so we're going to do that. Try and truncate it a little bit, but so it might be boring for some of you, but we need to make sure the record's clear. So, and I understand we're going to split the meeting with the other application, so we'll get as far as we can. We have multiple witnesses, but we know we won't finish tonight.
And actually, given the fact that we have a number of new members, it's probably great that they get to hear
Yes.
Mr. Borden's summary.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to request that Mr. Borden be sworn in so we can qualify him.
Mr. Alfieri, we will, and just I know you had been clear that given notice that you knew we're going to split it, but it's 9 o'clock will be the end of the Adventure Crossing.
Okay, fine.
Just so you're clear on that. Mr. Borden, do you swear that the testimony you're going to present to this board will be the truth and nothing but the truth?
I do,
And will you state your name again and give
Certainly.
your credentials before the record?
certainly. Ian Borden, President of Professional Design Services, Lakewood, New Jersey, licensed professional planner in the state of New Jersey, licensed in good standing, testified in front of this board and for many years.
Mr. Borden, this board accepts your credentials. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Ian, you heard my introduction. Would you like, please run through the approval history? I know you sent Anthony a bunch of exhibits
I
today.
did.
So direct them where you want to start.
I
please.
will. We'll start with A3, please, Anthony. We have exhibits that were provided a list to the board secretary and the board professionals this afternoon. Exhibit A1 is the copy of the application made on November 25th. A2 is the January 7th letter by the former board attorney, Gertner Murphy. And then A3, which is where we'll start, is an aerial photograph. I'm going to start, basically, there's two components of my testimony this evening. First is a history of the project. And second is a very detailed breakdown of what Phase 1 is. From a global perspective, touching on the key components of how things are being moved and what we're proposing. But to start with, and then after that, we'll get into the site plans, but obviously time is short tonight, so I don't know that we'll get there. So to start with the history, the property, what is on the screen with A3 is the entire Adventure Crossing tract. Phase 1 is a part of that. That will be developed as we go through. We have Exhibit A3 to start with. This is the first of A3. This is A3-1 that's on the screen. We have 6 of these. The property, which is outlined in yellow, which is the Adventure Crossing tract, comprises lots 1 through 6, 19 and 20, and Block 3001 contains 286.5 acres. This property has been in the Highway Commercial Zoning District for many years. The 2009 master plan particularly described this property along 195 between Six Flags and Route 95, which is on the right, top right of Exhibit A3-1, as a specific commercial destination. So there was close attention paid in the master plan, and the township had great, it was the objective of the master plan to make this more of a destination, not just a standard strip center. So this project has been working since my time working on it, which is 2017, to accomplish that goal. So we move now to Exhibit A32, the next one, please, Anthony. So this is where the project started, and this is what is Lot 2 of the tract. And this is the first property that was purchased by the Cardinale Partnership. And this project received a site plan approvals in 2017 and 18 under 2 resolutions, 2017 31 and 2018-01. The project included an air dome, 2 hotels, indoor recreation, and outdoor athletic fields. These will be common, these uses still remain and in fact have been constructed in the project. We'll see that in a little bit. There was a D6 height variance approved for the air dome. The outdoor athletic fields were an outdoor recreation use that was permitted use in the highway commercial zone. And once these approvals were received, my client, the applicant, continued with attempts to acquire adjacent properties to complete this commercial destination that was the objective of the master plan. And that leads us to A3-3. which is now you see the entire area that was in yellow in the first exhibit filled in with development. So there was acquisitions made of the adjoining properties, lots 1 and lots 4, 5, 5, 6, 3, 4, 5, 6, 19, and 20. So this is a general development plan that was created, adding those properties to the project. I had educated the board a bit in the section Phase 3-4 project about what a general development plan is. I know zoning boards don't see them very often, but they are a option under the municipal land use law on sites, available on sites of more than 100 acres. And a GDP is basically a set of conceptual plans submitted to a municipal board prior to an application for a subdivision or site plan. And it gives the developer the right to develop. It protects the application from zone changes, and those approvals can extend for as long as 20 years. So because the project is so large, again, 286.5 acres, the GDP tool was the proper method to develop basically concept plans to protect zoning, to lock in the uses, and so that's what we did. This GDP that's on the exhibit was approved by the zoning board in 2019 under 2 different resolutions, 2019-16 and 24. The GDP included the same uses in Lot 2, which is basically in the middle of that exhibit, along with additional commercial, recreation, and residential uses. There were 502 residential apartments, 58 affordable units, as well as various commercial and recreational uses. It introduced commercial pads along Monmouth Road, including fast food and convenience store. This GDP was appealed by neighboring property owners along Anderson Road. A subsequent settlement agreement required the applicant to abandon the GDP for the eastern portion of the site located on 5, 6, 19, and 20. That will be on the right side of the map, which then leads us to Exhibit A3-4. And this is the GDP that was submitted in 2020 as dictated by the settlement agreement. So this includes lots 1, 2, 3, and 4. The lots that are inside the yellow but shown not under any development are lots 5, 6, 19, and 20 to the right or to the east along Anderson Road. Anderson Road runs along the right side I should have said this, along the right side of this exhibit. Monmouth Road, of course, runs across the top, and 195 runs across the top corner. So this amended GDP was approved by the zoning board in 2020 for a 20-year period. That was resolution 2020-09. The 502 residential were simply shifted over towards lot 1, which is on the left side. Again, lot 2, which is the original commercial approval site plan, remained the same, as well as the commercial pads along Monmouth Road stayed the same. So this GDP, again, was approved in 2020 with a 20-year approval period. We moved to A3-5. Even though lots 5, 6, 19, and 20 were removed from the GDP, they were not removed from the project. That is extremely important. They remain part of the tract. So this portion of the project actually, I skipped over a step here. After the GDP was approved in 2020, there was an amendment made to the zoning ordinance. This is the highway commercial zone, but the highway commercial mixed-use zone was created under ordinance 244-57.2, adopted on February 11th, 2020. And the HCMU zone overlay includes those areas located all along Route 195 between Six Flags and 195. There were tract requirements associated with that zone, which we'll get to under the project as we narrow in on Phase 1. But it's important to just recall that is a distinguishing feature of this zone compared to others. So under the, now that the HCMU zone is permitted or is adopted, and that expanded the list of uses to include residential, other commercial, as well as warehousing, we developed a warehouse plan for what we call Phase 2, which is lots 5, 6, 19, and 20, which is Exhibit A 3-5. And this proposed 2 warehouse buildings comprising about 1 million square feet. That approval was issued for the site plan, major site plan, by the planning board because there were no variances required. The use is permitted under the HCMU zone. And the warehouse development in Phase 2 has subsequently been developed. We moved to Exhibit A 3-6, which is where so now we see on the right, you see the Phase 2 as approved, so now we're building the blocks as we took the GDP and subsequently went through site plans to implement the vision of the site plan and the vision of the HCMU zone. And here you see Phase 1, the Phase 1 that was the original Lot 2 approved in 2017 grew to include Lots 3 and 4, which are those properties along Monmouth Road with the fast food pads and the convenience store, among other uses. The key parts of the original site plan remained in place, that being the air dome and the athletic fields in the back. This major site plan, which included Lots 3 and 4 with Lot 2, was approved by the Zoning Board in 2019 under Resolution 2019-16, as well as 2021 by 2 different resolutions, 2021-12 and 19. And what was added to this plan as compared to the original Lot 2 approval was those items that were contained in the GDP, which is a convention center, medical research facility, medical campus, parking garage. The parking garage is topical, and we'll discuss that in the site plan for Phase 1, because the parking structure was determined to be a use, thereby needed a D1 variance because a parking structure is not listed in the ordinance as a permitted or accessory use. Obviously, parking is permitted, but there's no guidance in the ordinance about a parking structure. So we were requested to get a D1 variance, and that was obtained in 2021 as part of the approvals. The inclusion of Lots 3 and 4 along Monmouth Road with those pads created significant public benefits and truly implemented the commercial destination that this property was intended for, because there was significant roadway work required to Monmouth Road to reconfigure the jug handle, the Pine Drive jug handle, and create the main intersection with Pine Drive to create the 4th leg of the intersection into the project, to create the main access through the project, including, again, that existing Pine Drive or existing eastbound traffic, reconfiguring the jug handle for the Millstone traffic. Much of this part of the project has been built, including all of the public benefits, all the Monmouth Road work, the traffic signals has all been constructed. But staying on the tenor of the approval history of the project, we'll move to Exhibit A37.
I'm sorry, Mr. Borden, I don't want to interrupt your flow, but you were just saying, and that was a question I had, so I don't know if you want to address it now or later, of what on this A36 has actually been built. You just said something, but it was hard for me to follow.
That's actually part of the next exhibit.
Okay.
I have very detailed exhibits explaining what's built and what's, you'll see that in A4 and A5, if you don't mind. Oh, yes, I do. I must have cut it up by accident. This is, A3, I'll go through this very quickly. A37 is where Phase 3 came into play, obviously, and then A38 is Phase 4. Phase 3 was a mixed-use commercial residential project that was approved by the Planning Board in 2021 or 2021-18. And then A38 is the zoning board approved Phase 4. If you don't mind, Anthony, go to the next one. Which is these were on Lot 1. So call it the front portion of Lot 1 is A3 on the left. The rear portion is A4, which was approved in 2022 by the zoning board with a hotel, or third hotel, indoor water park, and a wave pool. So Exhibit A, or the site plan for Phase 3 and the site plan for Phase 4 had no variances. The zoning board retained jurisdiction over Phase 4 because it shared access with Phase 1, which, as I had just testified, had a D1 variance for the parking structure. So that shared access was the reason the jurisdiction was retained. And during the Phase 4 hearings, the zoning board retained jurisdiction over all parts of the Adventure Crossing project, regardless of whether variance is required or not.
So Ian, before you move to the next exhibit, with your pointer, can you just show the board how this entire project shares access through the various access points to 537?
I can. So here, we have Phase 1 is here, recall. These are lots 3 and 4 that we added. These are the fast food pads. Monmouth Road runs across the top here. Pine Drive, existing road into Millstone here. You have the Wawa across the street and the McDonald's. So we have as I had testified, the fourth leg of the Pine Drive intersection is the main access for the Adventure Crossing projects that runs down and into Phase 2. And then we have the jug handle that I testified is this. It's eastbound traffic on Monmouth Road to allow them to make a left turn onto Pine Drive. And then our other main access is Linda's Way, it's called. There's a reversing jug handle to the west of the property. If somebody's going westbound off of 195 and wants to come into the site, there's no left turn at Pine Drive. So they have to continue west to the reversing jug handle, come back on 537, either come down the jug handle or come straight to Pine Drive and turn right. So that's the main access. We have the jug handle continues on to Phase 2 behind the pads, right where I'm showing. And then we also have Linda's Way, which connects the reversing jug handle through Phase 3 and 4 into Phase 1.
And just one follow-up question. The warehouses, which are the furthest to the right, do they have a separate access point, or are they sharing that main access as their only way in and out of the site?
They only share access. There is no access to Anderson Road. There's no direct access to Phase 2 other than through Phase 1. I think it's important from a traffic perspective, it's kind of past history, but the Monmouth County, when they dualized Monmouth Road 20 years ago, I'm guessing, it was always intended that there be a surface road to connect the reversing jug handle with the Pine Drive jug handle. The Lot 1 owner, previous to the applicant, actually had a developer's agreement with the county to do improvements to allow that service road to be constructed. So that's what we call Linda's Way is actually the service road intended by the Monmouth County engineers. Monmouth County engineers, because Monmouth Road is the border of Monmouth and Ocean County, and under an agreement between the two counties, all engineering duties of Monmouth Road rest with the Monmouth County Engineering Department. So while we are under review and we're required to get approval from the Ocean County Planning Board, we are also required to obtain an engineering review from Monmouth County Engineering Office as part of the Ocean County Planning Board approval.
I have just a question while we're talking about access. So Linda Way, or whatever the name
Yes.
of it was, the traffic on that road also goes to the other part other application that we
Correct.
heard previously.
Yes.
So that a lot of the traffic coming into this section of Adventure Crossing is going to go through that area where the other units are, housing units are.
I think, well, that'll be traffic testimony, Doctor, but most of the traffic I think you'll hear is oriented from this site towards 195. In other words, the traffic from Phase 1 does not generally go westbound, it goes eastbound. But yes, the traffic is shared. That's the whole point of the project in large part, is to create this large project where residents have commercial businesses to frequent and be employed at.
Okay, so somebody coming off 195, and they want to get into the project here,
Yes,
they can't make a left, they have to go down to where the other,
they have to go down to this jug handle on the left side,
okay,
and then they have a choice. They can either do a U-turn and go back down Monmouth Road and turn in,
okay.
or they can go straight down and come down Linda's Way.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Certainly, my opinion is, and I'm not a traffic expert, but if I'm frequenting either a resident of Phase 1 or frequenting a business in Phase 1, the quicker route is to go down Monmouth Road and just turn right into the site. But they can certainly go through Linda's Way if they choose. So that is the history of the project. So now we move into the description of what we're proposing, which is Exhibit A4.
Sorry, can I just ask one question before you move on? It's more clarification, right? So in total, there's 4 phases?
Yes.
Okay. And how do you define phase? So it, like, for example, construction Phase 2 can't start until you do Phase 1, so it's not really time. It's not, how do I define a phase here? Because I appreciate the holistic view.
No, I understand.
That's very helpful, but I just wanted to break it down.
That's a good question, and the answer is that the phasing was really more a function of chronology than because obviously Phase 2 was constructed and Phase 1 is not yet constructed fully. So it's really a matter of chronology.
Chronology, not related to when construction can start, or
Correct.
one is dependent on the other, but chronology of when the plans were developed, or
Chronology of marketing,
marketing?
yes,
Okay, got it, thank you.
and infrastructure. There was a lot of infrastructure development of the property. I mentioned the roadway infrastructure. There's also been significant water and sewer infrastructure development through the project.
Right, okay, okay. Yeah, but the takeaway is one is not dependent on the other, really. They're
That's
kind
correct.
of independent, right?
And yeah, they're all part of the same project.
Right,
The only one that's truly dependent, as Mr. Alfieri said, is Phase 2, because Phase 2 does not have any access other than through Phase 1.
gotcha. Thank you.
So here we have an aerial exhibit, a recent aerial exhibit, which shows the property as it currently exists. So this simply shows the phases. We have Phase 1 in the center here. You see the black lines that differentiate it. Again, lots 2, 3, and 4. We have Phase 2, which you see is completed on lots 5, 6, 19, and 20. And then you have Lot 1, which has Phase 3 in the front and Phase 4 in the back. And there's significant areas of wetlands between the frontage between Phase 1 and Phase 3 and 4, and along the rear of Phase 4 and the rear of Phase 1. Those were all delineated and approved by the state of New Jersey. So what we now focusing on Phase 1, now we get into what I had testified in the earlier exhibits that Phase 1 had received an amended site plan back in 2021. We're seeking to amend that site plan again with what we're proposing tonight. And then here you can see what's actually been built. So to make things even more confusing to the question on the phasing, we now have our sub-phases.
Thanks.
I was told today, we should have named them something different, but I don't know, sub-phase, I suppose, or I don't know, section, I don't know. But anyway, we have, the 2021 approval has 5 different phases for inside Phase 1, which is Phase A, which is the front commercial pads and the convenience store. That's the Taco Bell, the Popeyes, the 7-Eleven, and then the mixed-use commercial building that has Starbucks and Panera, or Panda Express. I keep saying Panera, Panda Express. And the jug handle, that's all completed and occupied. Then we have Phase B, which is the air dome, which of course is completed. We have the athletic fields in the back, which is one of the first things completed. There's 8 athletic fields, synthetic turf athletic fields. That was Phase C. And then we have Phase D, which is the remaining portion along Monmouth Road, not completed. We have Phase E, which is the interior area, which will be a big focus of this application, and then the area below the air dome, which is our last subphase, and that is also. So these 3 portions of the site are incomplete. The infrastructure's been installed. There is part of the parking constructed here. There's solar panels and parking, but the uses that are approved in those areas have not been constructed. And that leads us to the next exhibit, which is Exhibit A5.
Mr. Board, before you move on, I just may ask, and you may choose to address this at another time. I noticed there's a lot, and a designation, looking at Phase 2, where you talk about the phase limit and the project limit, and you had testified earlier that though Phase 2, those properties were removed from the GDP, that you considered that they were still part of the project. At some point, whether now or later, I'd like you to address how you're making that distinction.
Absolutely, that's part of my testimony later, that is correct. And that goes back to the tract definition in the HCMU zone. So we'll review that when we get into the zoning. So then we get into A5-1, Anthony, if you don't mind. So this is simply the, this is actually A5. This is actually the site plan as the board has in their packet of plans, and this just simply is the proposed site plan. Let's go to the next one, Anthony, please. So it's very confusing because there's a lot of moving parts here on what we did to Phase 1 between 2021 and today. And what I did was I'm trying to thought of ways to educate the board on these things on an item by item. I want to go through every single use in Phase 1 and how we moved it, because what we have here is uses moving around. Uses are not being removed, as is publicly being stated by many people. So this is, so what we've set up is the next, I forget how, the remaining A5 exhibits are set up with the approved site plan on the left side, and then the proposed site plan on the right side. And every exhibit is for a particular building or use. So what we show, and this is example 1, A5-1, is you see in the brown here, the larger brown square is the air dome. That's building 200. In front of the air dome is that commercial or the brick and mortar commercial area, which contains a bar and grill, as well as the indoor recreation. The blue is an expansion of that between that existing building and the main access road. And that expansion of that commercial and this proposed amended approval basically stays the same. So that's a single-story expansion of the existing commercial building with the same use that was permitted in or approved, I should say, in 2021, which is commercial uses similar to what's already approved, including outdoor dining, so that remains the same as the current approval.
And that blue building is not built. The brown two to the left have been built. The blue is not.
That's correct. Yeah, anything that I show in blue is not constructed yet. But we shaded the brown here, as well as you see the 7-Eleven up top, the 2 fast foods. They're all shaded brown because they exist. You see the athletic fields on the bottom as they exist. And then we also shaded the gray, the main access road, as well as the jug handle and the Phase 2 access road, because those exist as well. What is in white underlined, these will be these will be in subsequent exhibits as we illustrate what happens to every single one of these, though none of those have been constructed. So then we go to A5-2. And here we have the Hilton Hotel that was approved in 2021. This is a hotel with 150 rooms and banquet. We're simply moving that from this location to Phase D. Recall, Phase D is this area up along Monmouth Road. So the hotel is moving up to that area. The 2 fast foods and a restaurant that were previously approved in 2021 have been eliminated.
Is that new, is this what was designated originally as hotel number 2?
Hotel number 1. We never called it that. I think that's been picked up by other people, but it is our, I believe it's Hotel 1 because this has always been the one that's been intended to be built next. If we had a different economic climate for the last 4 years, I think it would have been built, but that's not the case.
Through the chair, if I may, just to reiterate, Mr. Borden, so in Phase D1 or 1D, whatever we're calling it, the 2 fast food restaurants, the retail office and restaurant will be removed from the project. The 5-story, 134-room hotel will be moved to this phase from Phase E. Is that what's happening?
That's correct.
Okay. And then the 5-story, oh, okay, this is the same story. Okay, okay. I got
So
it.
the hotel shifts
Okay.
across this internal access road, and the 2 fast foods and other restaurant building are removed. I'm sorry. We're going to get to that in a minute. I'm sorry? That's a subsequent exhibit. We'll see that in a few minutes. So then we move to A5-3, which is hotel number 2, which is building 240 on our plans. This is what we call the Marriott Hotel. This is the hotel in the left on the approved plan. It's down along the main access road. We are moving that to the opposite side of the access road. That will be constructed on top of the commercial single-story structure that I described in Exhibit A51.
And there'll be
So
access-
that hotel is simply moving across the main access road.
And there'll be access directly from the hotel into the convention center?
That's the intent.
Okay.
Forgive me, say that again? It's
The
being built
question or
where?
what I said?
I'm sorry, it's being built where?
On top of that expansion of the commercial area that we're proposing. So that expansion, recall Exhibit A5-1 was the blue right here. Now we have the blue basically in the same spot. So that expansion is a single-story brick and mortar, same height as what's already there, and then the hotel's being built on top of that. So the lobby will, I guess, architecturally will be in that commercial space, and then you go upstairs to the hotel.
What is the height differential from proposed building 200 alone and building 200 plus building 250?
What is the,
You say you're putting in,
oh,
yeah.
the hotel, the combination of the commercial with the hotel would be 6 stories. Because you have a single-floor commercial with a 5-story hotel above it.
So you're going to need a variance for height on this?
Not for that building.
Not for that? Okay.
I should have noted on I mean, I have a summary of the variances we need at the end of this, but the A5-2, which is moving the hotel, the previous one, we moved the hotel to this location. Moving the Hilton Hotel to this location requires two variances. One is a height variance, a D6 height variance, and also requires a C variance for a setback of parking to the Monmouth Road right-of-way. Just generically, we'll get into the details of that when.
Isn't there also a?
This is A5-3 that's on the screen now.
No, that's A5-4. That's A5-4. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, you are correct. My numbering is messed up. I apologize. Yeah, my numbering when I originally testified was a bit off. So what's on the screen now is A5-4. I'm sorry.
And this is the Marriott Hotel, right, Mr. Burnham?
Correct.
Okay.
I made up nice notes, then I added one ahead of them and forgot to renumber them on my notes. So thank you for that clarification.
Through the chair, if I remember correctly, wasn't there a height variance granted to the dome?
Yes. Yeah, the air dome preceded the ACMU zone. The ACMU zone allows heights, previous to the ACMU zone, when we first did the first 2017 site plan of Lot 2, the AC zone only allows a height of 35 feet. The ACMU zone has a height of 35 feet, but it allows heights to be extended 1 feet vertically for every 10 feet of additional setback. So the farther you set back the building from Monmouth Road, the higher the buildings can be. It is. So it's part of the approved site plan, it just doesn't exist yet. That's correct.
Then it's missing from -3 and -4 on the approved site plan. It doesn't.
We were just trying to emphasize the different changes. Don't, there's nothing in, we were just trying to emphasize the moving of the buildings, not all the details of the approved site plan. I don't believe so. I don't believe so. I was trying to emphasize that staying the same on that exhibit, A5-2. So we're on A5-4 now, that's Marriott Hotel. Now we move to A5-5, which is the building 200. So in the 2021 Phase 1 site plan approval, we added the convention center, which is located on the left on the approved site plan here. That's building number 250. So what we're doing with this proposed amendment is moving the convention to the air dome. That doesn't mean that we're tearing down the air dome and building a new building. We're just using the air dome for a convention use. Right now, the air dome is used for Topgolf and other indoor recreation activities. It's also approved for assembly uses, and we're trying to integrate in a convention use in with that existing structure.
So you are eliminating a standalone convention center?
We are eliminating the standalone convention center, but not eliminating the use. The use would move, it's a more effective use of space that's already existing. There's no reason to build one if we have space that we can use today.
And how would you plan that? What kind of indoors, if you have a show, if you have a convention, you have to cover everything that's in there with some type of...
They just have boards they put over, it's synthetic grass inside the dome, they just have boards, they fold out boards they put over the grass.
So you could have entertainment and regular conventions and...
Anything you want.
Okay.
Then we move to A 5-6. Adjacent to the convention center in the 2021 approval was a parking garage. Recall I testified that that was the singular D1 variance that remained after the HCMU zone was adopted. So that use was approved next. The concept was the parking garage is really needed for the convention use. So it was located adjacent to the convention, adjacent to the Marriott Hotel. So now we are proposing to move it back across the street next to the Air Dome. Again, because the Air Dome was being used for convention and we have the Marriott, that retains that interconnectivity of the parking to the convention and the hotel, consistent with the interconnectivity of the approved use. Interestingly, before our 2021 approval, the parking garage was approved in this location. So we had it approved here, we moved it to here, and now we're moving it back as we trying to navigate these difficult economic conditions and changing market. So now we move to A 5-7. And the area that is in the last exhibit, that's the proposed location of the parking garage next to the Air Dome. This was approved in 2021 for the medical campus, the medical research, as well as a medical campus. Those are buildings number 260 and 270. Those uses are being located off the project. I know it's a bit hard to see on this aerial, but this is the proposed site of the medical campus. It is not the subject of this application. There will be a future application. We're not sure. We're developing the site plans now, so we're not even certain which board it would go to. It might come to this board. It might be at the planning board. But this is a property that is currently owned by the applicant. It's block 3101, lot 29, and this is on Monmouth Road. It's 1 mile west of the property, so it's this way. This is the Six Flags parking lot. This is Six Flags theme park with Hurricane Harbor right here. So this is a mile down the road. This is actually one of the main access roads from Six Flags parking to westbound 537. So that is a property that's currently owned by the applicant. My office has surveyed it, and we're developing site plans to develop these medical uses on that piece of property. Again, that's really just for educational purposes for the board. It's being eliminated from the project, but it's not being eliminated from a use that is really part of we consider this part of the project, but it's obviously not part of this amended phase 1, other than the fact that it's being removed.
Just one real quick question, because as you said, it's not for this. So in blue, that lot, that's the only thing, everything around it's not owned by the developer, right? Not owned by this project.
This lot.
Yeah, that lot.
That's correct.
Everything around
All of this
that
property
lot.
here is owned by Six Flags.
Not, oh, gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Then we move to A5-8. And this is where we get into the new mixed-use commercial complex or building that is Phase E. Remember, this is Phase E. That Phase D is up here where the Hilton Hotel's going. So now that through the subsequent exhibits, we've moved all the uses off of this area, right? We had 2 hotels, the convention and the parking. All of them have moved elsewhere in Phase 1. So now we're filling in this area with really the meat of this project, which is the mixed-use project. So what you're looking at here is the ground floor site plan, and you see the blue is the new commercial. So this is a new commercial that did not exist in Phase 1 before. This commercial, I had testified in Phase 3 and 4 that the mixed-use commercial in Phase 3 that was approved has moved, and this is where it's moved to. So this is 65,000 square feet of new commercial use in Phase 1. Now we move to Exhibit A 5-8, or A-9, I'm sorry, 5-9. We have our new hotel. This is our third hotel. I had also testified in Phase 3 and 4. Recall that there was a third hotel approved in Phase 4. That hotel is moving to this location. And that leads to A5-10. Which is, this is the residential buildings that are introduced now into Phase 1. So we are proposing in these residential buildings 641 residential apartments, of which 583 are market apartments, and 58 will be special needs affordable units. I'm just giving you a brief overview now. We'll get into the parking and all the different site plan components later, but just as again, a broad brush over this. So to summarize what is now the complete Phase 1.
Just through the chair, you're talking about the 641 units and what it includes and so on. We'll go into that in more detail.
Of course.
Particularly the density of the area.
Yes.
And what is permitted.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just giving the broad overview now, just trying to educate the board, paint the picture. So what we have at the end of all this with our amended Phase 1 are commercial uses totaling 237,086 square feet with 3 hotels. 2 of the 3 hotels have banquet facilities. One of those hotels with banquet has a bar and dining. Those are consistent. Those 3 hotels have been previously approved. We have not lost a hotel. We have not diminished a hotel. We have the 641 residential apartments, of which 58 would be special needs housing. There's parking, and there's a parking garage structure at the rear of this multi-story mixed-use building. So we now have 2 parking structures. We have the parking structure that we moved from Phase E to F, as well as a new parking structure. So we have a parking structure to support the commercial residential hotel, as well as a parking structure to support the convention and the Marriott. At the end of the day, and we'll get into them, just giving broad strokes here now, the total of all these parking garages and all the at-grade parking is 4,908 parking spaces, whereas I think it was like 4,200 are required.
I'm sorry, could you say that second sentence again? 4,908 parking and then...
I didn't write it in my notes, and I was starting to remember it, and I wasn't sure of my memory. The required amount of parking is 4,522.
Gene, we're going to have a transcript too, which we'll send to the board and you, so you don't have to go crazy with the notes, but.
Thank you, especially because I have terrible, terrible handwriting.
And I'm happy to share my notes as well, if that might be helpful.
Thank you.
So I guess the next step is to get into the, so let's get into the site plan and the zoning and the density. So the HCMU zone contains, under 244 57.2E, only permits residential where tract complies with the tract requirements under 57.2D. And those are, and this again goes back to the original exhibit of the tract, which is the 286.5 acres. The tract requirement, this ordinance was specifically developed to not allow any one or even any two or three of these various lots. Recall the lots were lots 1 through 6, 19, and 20. And this ordinance was specifically written to basically force these, to force the consolidation, if you were, of all these properties into a single project, because they didn't want a smaller project or a smaller accumulation of these properties to be able to utilize this ordinance. So the minimum tract area under that section is 70 acres. The tract width is 2,900 feet, contiguous feet, which is very important. Tract frontage is 2,900 feet, and the tract depth is 1,000 feet. So as presented from the original GDP, including through the Phase 2 site plan, because recall, the Phase 2 site plan was approved by the planning board, and even though it was not part of the GDP, it was still considered part of the tract. And it was because of that reason that the warehouse was permitted on that tract. If that property was considered to be not in the tract and part of the HC zone, the warehouse is not permitted. So that's a very important point, in my opinion, that emphasizes the fact that Phase 2 was part of this tract and always remains part of this tract, and thereby, so the empirical standards by which we complied with this tract area is, again, we have 286.5 acres. The tract width and frontage is 4,300 feet, and the tract depth is 2,950 feet. So when we calculate the density, we use that same tract area, which is 286.5 acres. That allows us to have 1,146 units. And when you combine the number of units proposed in Phase 1 and the number of units it's in the separate application in Phase 3 and 4, that equals the density of 4.0 units per acre. Now, it's also important to understand under the ordinance that the ordinance allows a technical subdivision. And a technical subdivision under the ordinance is required to be a minor subdivision, and any variances are not required. The zone requirements are not applied to the lot dimensions because the purpose of the subdivision is for ownership. There's so many components of this project, it was necessary to have flexibility for reasons of ownership and financing. So to the extent that parts of the project, I know the planner's letter makes points that there's been condominium documents filed, and ownership might have changed, like of Phase 2, for example. It's still part of the tract, as part of the density, as part of the original tract upon which the approvals were based.
And Ian, I'm just going to interrupt for 2 points. One is, I had a discussion with the board attorney prior to tonight, and the issue of density was raised, and we had agreed that we would prepare a written memo because a lot of it's going to be a legal interpretation.
I understand.
So we'll provide that between now and the next hearing, whenever that is, so you'll have plenty of time for your professionals to absorb that.
Thank you, Michelle Ferry. I was going to make that point as well.
Yes.
Obviously, Mr. Borden is putting information he thinks is important upon the record, and I assume that your memo will make some hay with it.
Yes, and just again, and then when Mr. Borden discussed the technical subdivision specifically, and again, that'll be in the memo, it specifically says in the ordinance that the intent is to allow the subdivision to create separate lots for the purpose of financing or the transfer of ownership. So it was always contemplated that either they'll borrow money to build these sections and or sell the properties to build the sections, but we'll get into that. But Ian, before...
Okay, then, excuse me, will what you're going to provide us, will that answer the questions that Mr. Peters had about how many are permitted?
Yes.
'Cause
Oh, yeah.
You
Yes.
both have different numbers, and there's a wide difference between...
We agree. We agree.
That'll-
We think we're right, but we have to prove it to you and to Mr. Peters in particular.
Okay.
But Ian, everything you've shown the board is just a bird's eye view, and I know we're not going to finish tonight. I wanted to see if you could jump to the end, just so they could see some of the architectural renderings, so they could put this in perspective as to what they're really looking at.
I think that's a good idea, because they're beautiful.
So Anthony, we're going to moving farther down.
I think what we do is. Okay, you want to get into the witness one or no? I think I'm going to jump right down to the renderings then. No, I'll start. And we have a number of architectural renderings. They're Exhibit A7, A7-1 through A7-24. But I think maybe just to start with, just if you don't mind, Anthony, jump to A7-16.
And we will have an architect at a subsequent, he's here tonight, but at a meeting to give you a lot more detail on the architecture, but we just want you to see the building so you see what we're talking about.
So here is scrolling through the boring building renderings, but what the architect has done is these really nice street views, perspectives.
You didn't make these with AI, right? Okay.
I attached the wrong PDF. Seems like I attached the wrong PDF file. I only got about 10 of them today. He's got a board in the back.
Are you looking at A16? Yeah. Mr. Borden?
Mr. Borden, I think that the board has them in the packets.
They do. No, but you have to, no, the hard copies, the board, let's just work off the hard copies if the board doesn't mind. If the board members flip on their level.
We just have 1 second. We think they're there. You have the hard copies, but we're going to try and get them on the screen.
The other side too, yeah.
This is what I was saying about with like AI.
In front of them.
Yeah, right?
While they're figuring this out, if the board members look at their packet that I handed out, you'll see towards the back, there's A numbers. If you look at A13,
Oh, A13?
yes. That's the first perspective rendering. Did we all see that? So that is a perspective, an aerial architectural perspective looking from Monmouth Road towards the east. So you see in the foreground, Monmouth Road is on the left side. You see the pads in the front. You see the two fast foods and the 7-Eleven in the immediate foreground. The air dome is obviously very visible with the fabric dome. You see the parking garage to the right, the athletic fields in the back right, the the Marriott Hotel in front of the Air Dome. And then across the main access drive, you see this multi-story structure with the commercial on the first floor, residential above, and then in the back of that, you see the hotel. So this is the multi-story mixed-use building that is the real key to this proposed amended. On the left, you see the Hilton Hotel along Monmouth Road.
Sorry, just looking at the large building, and maybe we'll get the hotel, but could you talk about the parking in the back? I mean, obviously, we see it up on the roof, or that,
That's correct. That's the top of the parking deck that you see in the very back.
and is the parking deck span that entire back piece?
Basically, yes. Yes, from right to left, it expands the rear of that entire building.
The parking is only in those areas where you show a car, right? The other buildings that have the roof and they're white, that doesn't mean you can park there, right? That's not a parking spot.
Talking about the parking deck behind the building?
Yeah, well, I'm saying, basically, can I go from this to here? No, right? This whole section here is not parking.
You can't drive into what appears to be a pool, I think.
Well, you drive into the parking garage from both sides, I believe.
I think I got it, thanks.
And
You're just seeing the cars on the top of the deck.
And staying on the roof, it looks like on both ends there are swimming pools, is that correct?
That'll be the architect's testimony. There's, on the hotel, there's a rooftop deck with, I believe, dining and outdoor pool. So, I mean, this really is a showpiece. There's nothing like this. This is truly the destination, in my opinion, that was envisioned 26 years ago in that original 2009 master plan.
I'm sorry, just so we're clear, the site plans that were submitted with part of the application don't show rooftop pools or dining, correct?
Well, the site plan wouldn't show it, but I believe the architectural plans do. Architectural plans were submitted. I can't tell you, Ernie, what exactly. Yeah, here you go. Thank you. Thank you, Stuart. Yeah, so there's A13 up on the screen. So here you have there's the hotel and the parking deck in the far back and the mixed use.
Mr. Ward, it looks like there are two pools up on the roof, one
I don't know.
larger one, and then a smaller one over on what I'll call my right.
That's for the architect. I don't know that type of detail. I'm sorry. You might get a little better view from A14 or the next exhibit, which. So here we have the aerial view looking northeast. So here we're looking, in the foreground here is the convention on the left, the parking deck here. The athletic fields are right. We're basically on top of the athletic fields. And we're looking out towards 195, the outlets in the distance, and you have the Hilton Hotel in the front. Monmouth Road is along the left side here. So here you're looking, you see the mixed use, the commercial on the ground floor, the residential above, the hotel in the back, and the parking deck in the back.
Sorry, I'm just still a little confused, but, so parking's in the back. When we talk about pool, for example, on the right side at the very end, that's the pool.
I think it's in this area.
The-
This is parking deck.
Okay. And so the rest of it
Oh, this
is all
here?
white. What is all?
I'm the architect will explain. I assume what that is a recreational amenity.
Okay. And that's where I was thinking, maybe you could park or something.
No.
Something, we're not sure what yet.
He'll provide more detailed testimony. There's a lot more exhibits here,
Okay.
but I believe that's a residential amenity.
Right, and I'd like that testimony to start with, what's shown on the architect's plans that were submitted as part of this application are not that.
Okay?
If not, get them up here now, and let's get them in, and we'll go through building plan A5 that doesn't show that. So it's not, I don't mind that he has a drawing. I mind we get into details that aren't part of the site plan, and they weren't submitted, they're not reviewed, they're not commented on. That's my concern, is we're mixing apples and oranges. That's not part of any submission that the board has right now.
The intent of what we're doing tonight is not to get into these types of details. I'm answering the board's questions, Ernie.
Ian, there's a pool and rooftop parking. It's not in the plans that were submitted. If they are, get the architect to come up here and testify to it. You're confusing the record and the board members.
Well, I thought I was educating, so on that note, maybe we should leave for the night.
We could get back, we just wanted you, the board, to see what the buildings look like, because you only saw them from the sky, you didn't get to see them in the other perspective. But we don't need to go further with this. And we agree, these exhibits were not submitted to the board because we just got them today for the purpose of the presentation. We will make a formal submission. to the board.
My understanding of what Mr. Peters was saying, and he's more than capable of speaking for himself, but just so we know where we are, is the board is looking at what they've been presented with and taking it in, and to the extent that it's supposed to be part of the board's reflection and making a decision on the application, in order to make a decision on the application, the architecturals or the site plans are going to have to contain these elements. Otherwise, the board will have to disregard the element. I think that's why the suggestion was made that the board's being confused, because if Mr. Peters hadn't told the board that, they would not know if they were going to vote tonight, which they're not going to, that they were approving a project with this rooftop parking and these rooftop pools. So if that's going to be part of what the application is, then that has to be submitted in a correct form for the board to consider.
Yeah, and we will. But I think we've gone far enough with these types of exhibits. At least you can see now what the buildings will look like instead of the aerial view. We can continue with some of the more site plan details because we do have a little time, if you don't mind, and then we will make a resubmission, a new submission of all the new architecturals.
Thank you.
I thought I was getting chased out. Because we showed a pool. I've completely lost my train of thought now, because I'm focused on a pool. What time? We got time. Okay, we keep going. I just felt like we were doing a nice presentation of a plan. I got waylaid for a detail that wasn't relevant. Okay, so let's break down the other uses. I talked about the zoning, the density for the residential. Of course, there will be a legal memo prepared for that, as discussed. We do require a singular variance for the residential units, and that is the length of a building. The HCMU zone does require that the buildings have a maximum length of, a residential building has a maximum length of 220 feet. That's pursuant to 244-57-2E6. We do exceed that length in this mixed-use building because of the shape of the building. I will provide planning testimony at the next hearing. Again, I'm doing the overview. We have the various commercial uses that I described are all permitted, and I'll break them down a little bit more. We have the general commercial uses, which is the first floor commercial use in Phase E. They're all permitted under 244-57.2A48. We have the hotels. We have the 3 hotels again. Hotels are permitted as a conditional use. The conditional use is found in 244-124. There's minimum lot area, width, frontage, depth, and building coverage requirements. We comply with all of those. Rather than take the time, I can do it if you want, but to break down each one of those, we'll provide that in our subsequent submittal that we'll make before the next hearing. But the minimum lot area is 2 acres. And we exceed that. The minimum, and there's also a lot area per unit of accommodation be less than 1,500 square feet. We meet that as well. We'll break that down in the subsequent submittal. We meet the width, frontage, depth, and coverage. We meet the setbacks as far as the building heights. As I testified previously, the building heights are 35 feet but may exceed under the ACMU zone, the maximum height requirement based on the setback from Monmouth Road. That is 1 foot of additional vertical height permitted beyond 35 feet for every 10 feet of additional setback. As I previously testified, the Phase D Hilton Hotel requires a D3 variance because the height of that hotel is 56 feet. That is the same height that it's approved at in 2021, but we did move it closer to Monmouth Road. So because it's closer to Monmouth Road, the maximum height of that hotel is permitted to be 42 feet. So we will be providing some testimony, subsequently hearings for D variance. The remaining 2 hotels, the second building 240 in Phase C and the third hotel in Phase E do not require height variances due to their increased setbacks from Monmouth Road. I believe I testified, again, we'll give plenty of testimony later, but there is a C variance required for the front setback of the parking to the Phase D Hilton Hotel. The ordinance requires a 20 feet setback between parking and right-of-way, and we are proposing 13.1 feet. That's just a C variance. The next use I want to discuss is the parking garage. I noted that the parking garage did obtain a D1 use variance in 2021. We've added a second parking garage structure, so obviously we've increased the intensity of the non-permitted use. So we'll provide plenty of testimony for a D1 use variance for the second parking garage. Yes. Quickly going over not going over site plan details, but just on, again, a macro perspective. We do have the 4908 parking spaces provided where 4522 is required. We will provide the required number of ADA and EV-ready spaces. The planner's letter had numerous circumstances of numbers and percentages of both. We will comply in all respects. I will say, however, that the parking will comply for the entire project. We're not required to comply with the parking, either the amount of parking or the EV or ADA on a per subphase. In other words, phase A, B, C, D, E, and F do not need to individually comply, but the project as a totality will comply because the project has shared parking and shared access between all of the uses. Signage for the property. Currently, there is the large freestanding sign that has a significant 458 square foot area, which is animated. That sign is existing out on Monmouth Road. There's no modifications proposed to that sign. There's no additional sign proposed. The 2021 approvals had 3 monument signs. Typically, we have been permitted to have a separate monument sign for those pad sites located along Monmouth Road, Popeyes and Taco Bell and 7-Eleven, for example. And we had 3 ground signs proposed for the 2 fast foods or approved for the 2 fast foods and restaurant approved in Phase D in 2021. Now that we're removing those and replacing them with the hotel, those 3 ground signs become 1. We just need the 1 for the hotel to be consistent with the sign package for the rest of the property. Just as a general statement, the project is serviced by public water and sewer. All of the infrastructure has been constructed, all of the water mains, the sewer pump station, which is located in Phase 4, all have been constructed. Additional services will be required for these shifting of buildings and the new mixed-use building. But the basic infrastructure is in place and will remain unchanged. The The area that we're proposing, particularly the mixed-use building, and all the uses really, have already been approved for these various, as my various exhibits showed, various commercial uses. So as a result, there's no additional impervious area created as part of this amendment. So the site does not meet the definition of major development under the New Jersey Stormwater Management Regulations, and because we do not propose a quarter acre of new impervious area. And otherwise, there's no change to the statement of operation that was submitted in the original project. The statement of operation identified the hours of operation, both for the commercial uses as well as the outdoor fields and the hotels. None of that is changed by this proposal to amend the approval. I can go over that in detail.
Mr. Gordon, could I just ask you, you were just to repeat what you had said about the stormwater?
Yes.
And so it's your position that there's not an increase in impervious coverage, so there's not a need to provide a enhanced stormwater management?
Correct. The stormwater management was constructed as part of the original approval. There's a number of stormwater basins that have been built and are operating today out on the property. And simply that by not adding additional impervious, there's no change to those basins required. Yeah, no, I'm done.
So this is probably a logical breaking point. The next meeting, we're going to submit the architectures. We're going to have the architect come up and provide a lot more detail to those exhibits. And your professionals will have a chance to issue amended reports to address whatever we resubmit. And we'll also provide that legal memo and whatever else the board thinks they need to see.
Thank you, Mr. Alfieri. And also, just in terms of the procedure, I don't know, typically, obviously, we would have the board and the professionals and the public have the opportunity to question Mr. Gordon tonight. I don't know if he's going to continue his testimony.
He'll definitely be back to put planning testimony on, and he may be back to supplement what he did tonight. But if you want to have questions tonight, he's also here. It doesn't matter.
My preference would be to go through, since the testimony is fresh, to go through, just take a few
Yeah.
minutes.
At this time, we're going to open it to the public. Anyone wishing to make comment about what you've heard testified to tonight, please feel free to come forward at this time. Seeing no one from the public come forward, I'm going to close public session. Mark or Ernie, do you have any questions or any comments you'd like to make?
Not off the initial testimony, no.
Board members, any questions? Dr. Houston?
Just out of curiosity, how many residents do you anticipate will live in this section? Buildings seem to have 5 or 6 floors. Do you have an outside number?
How many people?
Yes.
Well, I know we have 641 units. How many people?
2,000 plus?
Yeah, I mean,
Do you have the bedroom counts for the units?
we have a bedroom mix. I'll provide that. We have 316 one-bedroom and 325 two-bedroom.
Probably about 2 to 3 or 4, depending on which units they take. This is somewhere near 2,000, just off the top of my head.
Any additional questions for Mr. Gordon?
No, really just procedural question. So I have some questions, but I don't think it's appropriate for me to ask right now, but relates to the testimony. I can save, this is not like speak now, forever hold your peace, right? I can ask next time?
Yes, the representation is that Mr. Gordon will be returning and be available for questions from the board.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, just because of time and everything, I'd rather just save it. Thank you.
So do we have Excuse me. Do we have an established new date, Gina, for when they can come back? I'm sorry, Mr.
Yeah,
Peters, you're going
Madam
to say
Chair,
something?
it might seem odd, but could we just take a 2-minute break to go over the scheduling? Because there was a request from another applicant at a future date for another hearing. You guys don't have that in front of you, I don't think. So before we dismiss this applicant, if we could just talk about it for 2 minutes?
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Just give us a few minutes to get a date and we'll be great too. Sure, yes.
Sorry, we were just going over the schedule, and it appears May 21st would be the return date. Or the next date, is a better way to put it. No further notice required.
Okay, that's fine. So you'll announce to the public, May 21st works, 7 o'clock on the no notice to the public, not that there's many here.
Yes, I said it and I'll say it again.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
May 21st, 7 o'clock, no additional notice.
Thank you, and that gives us time to make a full submission and for everyone to review it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll take a short break and then we'll start at 9 o'clock with the next application. Thank you. We're going to call the meeting back to order, and we're going to move on to applicant number 3, Israel Burnam, use variance 3490. Ms. Jennings?
Thank you. Good evening. For the record, I'm Donna Jennings from the law firm of Wilentz, Goldman, and Spitzer. As the board is aware, the applicant is here this evening seeking use and bulk variance approval to permit the use of a tent as a temporary shul at property located at 263 Jackson Pines Road and identified as Block 14001, Lot 9 in the Township's tax map. The property is located in the R3 zone. If approved, the applicant will return to seek site plan approval. The applicant's proposed shul is temporary and will only be used until a permanent house of worship is constructed. To that end, the applicant has already received site plan approval from the Jackson Township Planning Board for the construction of a permanent shul located at 217 Brewers Bridge Road. For that project, the applicant is completing its final resolution compliance items and expects to receive building permits shortly. Currently, in addition to the tent, the property is improved with a single-family residence, which is the residence of the shul's rabbi, and will become an accessory use to the shul. The property is also improved with a pole barn gym, which is used as a wrestling school with limited hours, open only in the evenings, 4 days a week. That use received approval from this board in 2009. When the applicant originally submitted this application back in 2023, the proposed house of worship was a conditional use subject to the standards of Ordinance Section 244-115 of the Township's ordinance. However, with the adoption of Ordinance 31-23, which became effective in early 2024, the house of worship use was converted into a permitted principal use subject to the bulk standards set forth in Ordinance Section 244-46G4 of the amended ordinance. As a result of the favorable ordinance change, the application no longer requires a variance for the conditional use standards for the house of worship itself. However, the applicant is still seeking bulk variances for minimum side yard setback to allow the existing residence, which is now considered the accessory structure, to be in the front yard of the house of worship, and for a minimum landscape buffer. The applicant does now, however, need a conditional use variance to permit the wrestling school to remain at the rear of the property because it was approved back in 2009 as a home occupation where the operator lived in the single-family home and the wrestling school was deemed a home occupation. He no longer lives there, actually hasn't lived there since the shul went there back during COVID. So since we're here, we'd like to get everything kind of squared away with respect to the uses on the site and the structures on the site, so hopefully we don't have to come back again.
Ms. Jennings, may I ask you a question now, or did you want to?
You can.
Yeah, just because I'm just trying to clarify. So I understand the request regarding the wrestling school, that it's no longer acceptable as a home occupation because the home isn't occupied. My understanding from the application is that you are seeking to have the pole barn wrestling school become a principal structure or use. But what you just said now, I just want to make sure that I understand what's going to happen under this application sort of long-term, would be that the single-family home would be an accessory use to the shul, which makes sense today. But I believe that the application said, and you had just before on the record, that the plan is that the shul has already received site plan approval and is moving to 217 Brewers Bridge Road in the next couple of years, in the foreseeable future. What would be the status of the single-family home once the shul is no longer on this site?
I believe it would be a principal use, a single-family home.
And then you'd have two principal uses?
Correct, and that was called out in Mr. Peters' review letter. So it's kind of a weird ask, but we want to ask for the D variance to allow two principal uses because the shul is just something temporary in time.
Thank you.
Okay. If the pole barn with the wrestling school is on the property and it's a commercial, for commercial use and it's a principal use, doesn't it make the property a commercial use? You asking us to approve a commercial use in a residential zone?
Well, it's already approved and it's been there since 2009.
Well, I was on the board when that was approved. And the owner of the wrestling school lived in the house. I remember him coming before the board, and he was basically a home business use, so, and which was legal under our ordinances. But this is completely different. You're taking a separate entity, which is commercial, and asking for it to be the principal use in a residential zone.
That is correct from a land use perspective, but from a practical perspective, it's being used the same way it's been used since 2009, when it was
At
approved.
some point, we're going to get testimony and a planning argument, because I think it's important to set forth what the original approval was for. Somewhere in here, we said, we're going to straighten this out. So something got built apparently without permits or approvals, and now we're in this, how do we deal with it on a temporary basis until something else happens? Is that a fair assessment?
I would say that that's fair.
And then, so I think we need to go through, and again, while I don't ever think Ms. Jennings doesn't tell us 100% of the truth, I think we need to sort of elicit some testimony from folks about what happened, what it was called, what their argument is about where we are now, and then what they're asking for. And I think that would, streamline it or clarify it, because the confusion, I know everyone sort of jumps to the existing tent on the deck being a principal structure. I think we let them present their case, and then I think we can ask 1,000 questions. That make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Can I just ask one question, though? Not about the use itself. I just want to go back to something you said earlier, when one of the earlier dates when this was supposed to be heard. Myself and somebody else on the board had went to see the property. And there was someone living in the house who said they were not the homeowner. So, but you said the homeowner lives in the home?
The rabbi lives in the home. But when the wrestling school got approved, the owner of the wrestling school, who is here in the audience, lived in that home.
So I'm talking whatever dates that this has been carried multiple times. So let's say maybe it was May of '24. Myself and somebody who was on the board at that time had went to visit, and there was a woman who said that they were not the homeowner that they were renting. So I'm just trying to be clear who lives there.
My understanding is the rabbi lives there.
And he's the owner.
No, I think Burnam, who was the applicant, and a member of the shul actually bought the home for the shul, but he personally, I believe, owns it if you look at the township tax records, and he's the applicant, Israel Burnam.
But he doesn't live there.
No, Mr. Burnam does not live there. The rabbi lives there.
And is he renting it from the owner?
No, the rabbi lives there at the pleasure of the congregation.
So it's not a rental property?
No. Just like I know I'm Catholic and our priest lives in a home that was dedicated to the church for the use of who's ever the priest of the church.
I think the only difference is that an individual owns the property, the congregation doesn't own the property.
That's correct. Okay. And maybe just for a little, and I guess Mr. Halbert will confirm this information, but when the rabbi started living in the home originally, the congregation was much smaller, and they all prayed in the home, which they're allowed to do up to about 30 people. But COVID hit. And when COVID hit, everybody was allowed to put tents out so they could spread out. And when COVID was over, they did originally take the tent down, but the rabbi himself is wheelchair-bound, so they would have to carry him into the basement, and they decided this is not really the safest and best idea, so they put the tent back up. So that's why the tent is there, and it was deemed unlawful after COVID crisis was over. And that's kind of where we find ourselves. All right, so I think with that, I just want to, for the record, just indicate that we are in receipt of some updated reports. I'll say the board planner did update his report February 26, 2025. We also got an updated report from the board engineer dated March 5th, 2025. And there is a Bureau of Fire Safety memo dated August 19th, 2024, where he had indicated no issue with the application. So with that, I do have three witnesses, and Mr. Halpert, who is sitting to my left, even though we're not going for site plan, he is going to describe what the structures are on the site, the use of the different buildings, et cetera, to give you the factual background that you need. We also have our traffic engineer, John Ray, with us this evening, and we also have our professional planner. Okay, with that, we'll have Mr. Halpert sworn in. Oh, and can we have another one of the microphones or no?
Do you swear that, or affirm that the testimony you'll give before this board will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And will you state your name and put your credentials before the board?
Eric Halpert, Halpert, licensed professional engineer and planner in the state of New Jersey. I had these plans prepared under my supervision, and I have provided testimony before this board and multiple boards before. I'll be providing engineering testimony, not planning testimony.
Mr. Halpert, this board accepts your credentials.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And if you could, Mr. Halpert, describe the site and the area around the site, and if you're going to rely on any exhibits, let's have them marked into evidence.
I will describe the site in front of the board is exhibit set. We could mark it as A1. I'll go through the general site, then discuss operations based on discussions with the applicant, and then I'll go through the site plan to identify the variances required and the layout. This is a bifurcated application. It's a variance plan. It's not an engineered site plan, and I'll go through that variance plan. In front of the board is an aerial exhibit depicting, in essence, the proximity of the approved site plan to our current property that is the application in front of the board. Jackson Pines Road runs along where I am showing. The site under discussion is shaded. Thank you. Jackson Pines Road runs over here. The pole barn, the wrestling school is in the rear of the property. The single-family dwelling is in the front of the property, and the tent is captured in the aerial. It's been up for a number of years. The tent is located behind the single-family dwelling in front of the pole barn, in front of the wrestling school. This is Jackson Pines Road. Below, at the bottom of the screen, is South Cooks Bridge Road. It goes to Brewers Bridge Road. The site plan that was referred to earlier by Ms. Jennings was approved at 217 Brewers Bridge Road, which is essentially around the corner from the current property in the same neighborhood that the applicant and the general congregants reside. As mentioned earlier, that has already received site plan approval. That is in the late stages of resolution compliance. They have received a bond estimate and are getting the bonds. There are other items that require Township Council resolutions, such as soil export permits, basin agreements, but we are toward the end of resolution compliance. It would be reasonable to say that in the spring, a zoning permit would be in hand, but that cannot be certain because until we get there, we're not there. So again, the dirt that is shown in the aerial is a property across the street, not related to this application. That is a subdivision currently under construction. This is where our site is. This is where the proposed shul is, and this is where our site that is before the board is. Anthony, I'm sorry, so before I get into the site, I'll just go through the operations of the tent and of the wrestling school, and the applicant, the owner of the wrestling school is here if there are more questions regarding the operations. So the operations of the shul involve prayers in the morning and in the evening. The prayers beginning generally 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. In the evening, they are run from 9 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. The applicant has, on average, there are approximately 30 to 40 congregant families. On Shabbos, there could be, on the Sabbath, there could be 50 to 60 people with adding children or spouses. 50% of the congregants generally would drive during the week. On the Sabbath, they all are going to be walking. I think it will be beneficial for the board. There are some, Anthony, could you continue to, in this set, to sheet 3, 4, and to sheet 3, just so the board sees a picture of the tent that we're discussing. The tent, this is a tent that is before the board for approval. As mentioned earlier, the intent over here is for it to be temporary until the shul is fully constructed, which could take a couple years. The tent is a single room. It is approximately 1,650 square feet. And we'll get into septic, we'll get into the site plan a little later, but just in terms of the layout of the tent, restroom facilities are located within the home. They're not located within the tent. It is basically a single room. There is an ability to warm up some food, some post prayer services. The congregants will sometimes get together and with some food that is only warmed. There's no food preparation on site. There is a sink within the tent. Anthony, could you go to the next picture, to the next, one more picture. I'm sorry, and one more, right? We should just show the HVAC. They do have, the tent is equipped with heat and air conditioning. It is my understanding it has been up for a number of years, and it has been able to withstand the weather as it is tied down. The building department certainly, if the board will grant approval, the applicant will be required to obtain necessary permits and inspections, and we are only discussing the site and the planning.
I'm sorry, if I may, you mentioned the warming of the food. How is that done?
There is electricity within the within the tent, and they're able to warm it up via a warmer.
Thank you.
Where does the water from the sink drain to?
The water from the sink is draining back to the pipes within the house and going to their septic field.
So the sink is hooked up to the septic tank?
It is hooked up through it is hooked up through the house to the septic field,
And that's all been inspected and that's been signed off on?
I don't know about that. As part of this approval, a Ocean County Board of Health approval will be required to be obtained for an expansion of the septic field because of the increased use due to the synagogue. And as part of that, the field will be required to be expanded.
Okay, and when was this tent erected?
It is my understanding approximately 2020, during COVID.
And it was erected and concrete slab poured and everything else without any?
I have been brought on to it is my understanding that their permits were not obtained at the time, and code enforcement did cite the applicant, and we are here now for an approval.
And I just might add, there is a municipal court proceeding, but we submitted a full inspector's report that checked everything out. We believe the municipal court is going to be resolved once we get an approval if we get an approval here. So that's pending. There's a return date tomorrow to municipal court.
Mr. Martin?
You done, Mr. Wood?
Oh,
No,
No, you're good. Just one quick question, just so that I follow. So this is the tent that we're calling the wrestling school?
No.
No, no.
Okay, I just want to make sure I keep following. Thank you.
You know, there's a pole barn in the back of the property that's the wrestling school. We're calling the tent the shul, and the rabbis, the single-family home, the parsonage, which is now permitted uses in the zone.
I'll go through the existing conditions plan to show the juxtaposition of the different structures now. Anthony, are you able to bring up the variant, the site plan? The other file? Thank you. Could you go to sheet 2? And could you, to the next sheet, thank you. And could you zoom into this area? Thank you. And again, I'm just going through operations still, and I provided pictures for the tent because it's a tent. There are no architect plans. The pole barn is existing, so the pole barn, the wrestling school is this structure located in the rear that Ms. Jennings referred to as being previously approved. Just to discuss the operations, this is a wrestling school that was approved, operated by Mr. Stephen Riviera, and the hours are generally toward the end of the day. It operates 4 days a week. There are generally 2 sessions a day between 5:30 and 9:30, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Sunday. The number of students at most is typically 25 students. There could be 5 coaches, and the children range in grade from 1 to 12. There are no other events associated with the wrestling school. This is a wrestling school, and there are no other activities. That is the operations of both the tent, shul, and the wrestling school.
And those hours and days of operation are consistent with the original approval from 2008 or 9?
These hours are consistent and slightly below what had been previously approved. We do have the resolution. It is part of the documents cited in the review letters, and there was an approval for 5 days a week, and the owner is using it for 4 days a week.
And how many people live in the home?
There are 2. The home is a 4-bedroom home. It is a couple with no children, as I understand. The rabbi and his wife. There are no children living with them.
could you zoom in on where the tent is on this?
Yes, so I'll go through, yes. The tent is over here. Could you zoom out a little bit just to get a better perspective of the whole site, and then we'll zoom back in. Could you just zoom out for a minute just so we see the whole site at once? Just to capture Jackson Pines Road as well, just to get the whole plan. So this is Jackson Pines Road, this is the dwelling, and this is the tent. And now could you zoom back in, please? So this is the tent. It is to the rear of the single-family dwelling. There is a large gravel area between the tent and the wrestling school. That's where the tent is located.
And is that gravel area, is that for parking?
That gravel area is being used for parking.
And how many spaces are there?
So we do have a site plan proposing spaces. Currently, there are no delineated spaces in this gravel area. The current amount of spaces delineated is 10 in the rear, behind the wrestling school. In front of the wrestling school, there would be room for about 9 spaces, not delineated, just within gravel. And I could measure how many there are. Our site plan.
No,
Our site plan is proposing parking sufficient to comply with the ordinance.
So you have enough parking with normal calculations, I guess, for how many congregants there are and how many parking places there are. If also there's a wrestling thing going on at the same time.
Correct. I will go through, I'm leading up to the site plan. We'll go through the parking calculations, what is proposed, and demonstrating whether it's sufficient.
Just if I could piggyback a little bit. So the wrestling school, whatever you want to call it, is operated by Stephen Rivera, I think you said?
Yeah, the gentleman
Yes.
that just stood up.
Yes.
Does Stephen rent that space? Like, who won't? How's that working?
That I don't know. Mr. Rivera would know that answer.
Okay, so
I believe he rents the space,
okay.
probably from Mr. Burnam, who owns the property.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I'll have more questions around that area. Sure. Okay, thanks.
Okay. So I'll go through the site plan. It's a variance plan. It's, could you please go to the next sheet, Anthony? And could you zoom in a little bit? And zoom out just to capture the parking, just a little bit more to zoom out. Thank you. So the site plan is meant to, this is a variance plan meant to depict the ability for the applicant to install improvements that would be required should the board grant approval. This is not this is a bifurcated application. It is not fully engineered. It is not graded, but it is meant just to demonstrate the ability for improvements that would be required are able to be installed. To go through, so we have several uses. First, regarding submission, the applicant, as any condition of approval, will be required to obtain several outside agency approvals. One of them would be Ocean County Board of Health. There have been no submissions made yet to the outside agency. Should the board grant approval, the applicant would be required to obtain. However, the applicant did make sure to submit the plan to the fire official just for fire circulation to ensure that the fire circulation is acceptable to the fire official and the applicant is in receipt of a letter from the fire official regarding the circulation. That would be separate from any building code, subcode related to the structure, but just for the site layout. As mentioned earlier, this is an increase in use, increase in load, and the septic field would need to be expanded, and there is an ability to do that. So the site plan depict.
Sorry. Is that letter being provided to the board?
You have the letter.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I did not see it.
The site plan depicts a drive aisle with parking both in the rear, expanding the existing parking. Behind the wrestling school, add parking in front alongside the dwelling and the tent. At the time that this plan was prepared, their ordinance governing this application regarding houses of worship was 244115, which had different requirements, and the parking calculation shown on the plan is per the ordinance that existed at the time. The current ordinance would decrease the requirement for parking for the house of worship. The current ordinance requirement under 24446G, places of worship in the R3 zone, is for spaces between assembly, main sanctuary places between 800 and 2,000 square feet is 1.25 per 100 square feet. The tent is 1649. depicted on the plan, which would result in a parking requirement of 21 for the place of worship. The dwelling is a 4-bedroom dwelling per RSIS. Viewing the per RSIS, the requirement would be 2, and as indicated on the plans, the square footage of the wrestling school is a little over 4,000 square feet and would result in a requirement of 41 spaces for the wrestling school. So the current, per the current ordinance, the requirement is reduced from the original indicated number on the plan of 41 plus, 76. It is reduced to 64 is the current, would be the current requirement parking between the dwelling, the place of worship, and the pole barn. I would point out, we do have our traffic expert who will speak more to this. The pole barn has been operating for a number of years. We are before the board because of a planning issue, and there's going to be testimony regarding the planning issue. In terms of the operations of the wrestling school, there are no changes. Looking at the previous resolution, it did not seem like the board was requiring 41 spaces. It does not seem to me that 41 spaces would be actually needed for the pole barn, and the board may consider reducing the requirement of the spaces for the wrestling school. As I indicated earlier, there are currently 10 delineated spaces in the rear. The gravel area directly in front, meaning taking away the gravel area that is being used for the synagogue, adding the gravel area is approximately 9. There are approximately 19 current spaces, and the traffic engineer will provide more testimony regarding any possible reduction in the requirement the board would want to seek to impose for the wrestling school. As depicted on the plan, the applicant has the ability to provide the full 41. I'm just pointing out that the wrestling school has been in operation for a number of years, and that number of 1 per 100 square feet is a general requirement covering many different operations. This is a smaller operation operating 2 classes a day toward the end of the day, and it does not seem like 41 spaces should be required for the wrestling school. But I'm pointing that out, and we'll leave that for the traffic engineer to go into more detail if the board would consider that. Again, the applicant has the ability to provide it all. I'd like to go through the various bulk variances that are associated with the plan, with the wrestling school, with the conditional use of the wrestling school. Sorry, 1 minute. So discussing first I will be putting on the record just the different variances required, the planning testimony. The planner is going to be providing justification for the use variances, and the bulk variances will be subsumed within the use variances. I'm going through the variances that are required. As indicated on the plan, could you zoom to Anthony, could you go to let's start with the wrestling school in the rear. The existing setback of the wrestling school is under 50 feet. It is 48.9 feet, and there is a requirement under the quasi-public under the quasi-public recreation for 50 feet, and this is 48.9 feet. The parking depicted is within 25 feet from the property lines where 50 feet would be required. The tent is at 40 feet where 50 feet would be required. The requirement for the tent, 244-46G, places of worship in the R3 zone require for properties over 2 acres, and this property is approximately 4.55 acres, require 50 feet of buffering along all sides. The structure cannot be closer than 50 feet, and this property, those would be considered bulk variances under 24446G, and this proposed plan would be proposing parking closer than 50 feet. The structure is closer than 50 feet as well. As indicated earlier, the single-family dwelling presently is going to be an accessory use temporarily under the approval for the next couple years. The single-family dwelling as an accessory use in the front yard is an additional variance. I'm sorry, I skipped one piece of going into the site plan to go back for a minute. The site plan was depicting the parking. It is showing curbing. The intent is curbing. The intent of the plan shown is curbing and asphalt. Presently, there is generally asphalt along the southern side of the property to get to the rear of the property where there is asphalt parking. The remainder of the property's parking in the existing conditions is gravel. In as much as the proposed improvements solely for the tent are temporary, there was a comment in the board planner's review letter regarding the intensity of the proposed improvements, and the applicant would need to come back for site plan, preliminary and final site plan approval, and the applicant would be willing, certainly, to provide a less intense improvements, such as gravel temporarily, if that would be okay with the board. It would need to be delineated. The parking spaces would need to be delineated, but it does seem sensible to not require the applicant to provide asphalt with curbing for a use that's going to only exist for a number of years, and just to focus on the wrestling school and whatever the board's parking requirement for that would be, to ensure that that's going to be constructed sufficient for permanent use. However, the parking that would be required for the tent could be of a more temporary nature to the satisfaction of the board in conjunction with the board's professionals. That may affect the storm. Again, this plan the applicant would be required to come back before the board with a site plan, preliminary and final site plan, and depending on the exact parking requirement and the nature of the parking, the applicant may or may not be required to provide stormwater management. Again, the variance plan just shows an area that can be used for a water quality basin with underground storage, but once it is clear the amount of parking, the type of parking, the applicant will supply the stormwater management as necessary per the proposed improvements. The septic, and regarding the septic, there is a septic field shown. However, that septic field would likely not be the location of the proposed septic because, as mentioned earlier, the all the uses generating the all the sanitary uses are within the dwelling, and therefore it would just be a single septic field that would need to be expanded. Through open requests, the dwelling's septic is near the front of the property. There is sufficient room to expand the septic field per the requirements of a place of worship, which would generally be a general assembly requirement, which is typically the residential requirement is actually often larger than some commercial uses because the intensity of use is generally within the residence, and the applicant will obtain approval from the Ocean County Board of Health, and there is sufficient room on the property to contain an expanded septic field. The septic field for the wrestling school is in the rear and will remain the same, untouched. There are no changes to the operations of the wrestling school. The changes are to the tent combined with the dwelling, and the dwelling's septic field is what is going to need to be expanded. I began going through some of the bulk variances. I could continue going through more of the bulk variances. I interrupted myself. I apologize. I'll go through more of the bulk variances and go through some of the review letters comments. Regarding the tent. So the tent, again, is going to be a principal use, and it is place of worship under 24446G. It is front yard setback is met, the rear yard setback is met, and as mentioned earlier, the side yard setback is not going to be met. Additionally, buffering requirements per 244-46G are not being met, and the applicant requires variance for that also. The applicant is prepared to provide buffering within the 25 feet. There is just a note, landscape to be provided. Again, the applicant, should the board grant approval, will be required to return with a preliminary and final site plan and landscaping to provide buffering, screening, shall be shown on the site plan to 25 feet, as opposed to the 50 feet that is required per the ordinance. Regarding the pole barn, as mentioned earlier, the existing nonconformity of 48.9 is a variance to the side yard. The single-family dwelling is a accessory structure under the current temporary use, and that is a variance with having it in the front yard. There are other variances called out regarding the maximum building height, and I wasn't clear. I wasn't clear regarding the 15 feet. It certainly is over 15 feet. The ordinance seems to be 25 feet, and it is greater than 25 feet either way. The single-family dwelling. The side yard setback indicated in the board planner's review letter is 75 feet, and it is less than that. The side yard setback at 244, the side yard setback for an accessory structure may appear to be 50 feet, and it would not require that bulk variance. There is a detached garage that is too close to the side yard. The building height, there was a comment to provide the building height of the detached garage. It is approximately 11 feet. It is definitely under 15 feet.
Could you show where that garage is?
There is over here, that garage over there next to the pole barn, next to the wrestling school.
Does the wrestling school use that?
I'm sorry?
Does the wrestling
I'm not sure. I would have to check. He uses, the wrestling school uses it for storage. The parking requirements were discussed, so again, per the current ordinance, the requirement was 64. To go through some of the comments generally are are regarding variances, testimony, planning testimony shall be provided for all the variances. There was a comment regarding providing sidewalk and curb, and the applicant is willing to provide on the site plan that will be required to be provided will show curb and sidewalk along the frontage of Jackson Pines Road. That will conclude my testimony.
If I may, and I'm sorry if I missed it in your testimony, was there, because I saw a reference to 2 trailers on the property, and I wasn't sure where they're located.
There are 2 trailers to the rear of the wrestling school.
And what is their operational?
No, you can tell me. No. Come here.
I can just tell you straight up.
Should we swear Mr. Rivera? Judges, I really think that we need to swear Mr. Rivera.
Well, no,
Okay, all right, we'll finish this way then.
As per the owner of the wrestling school, those are going to be removed from the property. Those are going to be removed from the property.
When?
Want to swear him in?
Well, we can wait and ask this question.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Dr. Thompson?
Okay, thank you. Number of questions. When I visited the site, I saw a tent surrounded by a 6-foot fence, which only had one way out. And the left side of the tent, you had the 2 HVAC units, and the other side had a bunch of wooden chairs sitting around, strewn about, which left only one way out of the tent. The front of the tent had 2 wooden doors letting people out, and there is no way to leave that tent if there's an emergency. People would be trapped by one way out through the tent, and then you're surrounded by a 6-foot fence with one exit out. So something has to be done about that. Along with the information you sent us, you sent something called the copy of the Illinois State Fire Marshal's report regarding membrane structures and tents used for outdoor dining. New Jersey has its own fire code, and I think we should be using that. It's in the fire code, it's section 3101, and there are many things that...
Wait, what are you talking about, Illinois?
I'm sorry?
I sent in the Illinois, the Illinois requirements were sent in by the applicant.
Well, that's I mean, you could just as well use the New Jersey.
I don't know where you're getting the Illinois from.
Well, I have a copy of it right here. I could give it to you. Somebody sent it to me, so it came along with everything that was sent in. Anyway, it doesn't matter. You should be using the New Jersey. I think you will agree with that.
We would agree.
Okay. Now, you said that you sent in a report to the fire inspector, and he said the circulation is fine. Nothing was said about the safety. And the report, the fire code has pages and pages of things that have to be addressed if this is going to be there. Granted, the synagogue is fine. It could be there, but you have to consider the safety of anybody who's using it. Now, I don't know how you want to do it. should the board call in our fire inspector and ask pointed questions, or do you want to call the fire inspector in and ask your questions? In all the years I've been on the board, I've never had a fire inspector asked to come in, but I think this is definitely needed. I mean.
Well, there's a letter from the Fire Bureau dated August 19, 2024, and it says that the 1,650 square foot tent is approved by my office. However, you have to come for
Well,
full
then
review for.
Then, to the board, I think we have so many people involved in the safety issue that the fire inspector has to come down, and should be asked to come down. Just to go through some of them, you already said that the tent was just put up without permission, basically. And you gave the hours that it was going to be used. The report wants to know the aisles, where the exit signs are, the performance of the treatment of the tent. Is it certified? How the anchors are placed there, the egress I mentioned.
Oh, respectfully, all those are building code issues, and we do have the municipal court proceeding, and there's been a lot of discussions regarding all of that at the municipal court level. I'm not really sure that that's really the zoning board's job.
Well, to the extent that you are here on a bifurcated application, there's the initial part regarding the use, but if you were looking for approval of the structure, then the question of the safety of the structure is appropriate for the board, I think.
Well, I think somehow that has to be resolved. I just can't see how we can let a safety issue with so many people involved just be eliminated.
Ms. Jennings, if you would consider to Dr. Hofstein's point, perhaps providing additional information on the fire safety issue that may address the problem without the need for testimony or bringing in the fire marshal on behalf of the board.
Yeah, that's fine. I know we have a report that was submitted with the municipal court, so perhaps that will satisfy.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Ms. Jennings, I don't know if it would be helpful for the board to understand. Mr. Halpert indicated we're going to get permits and inspections as a condition of the approval. So can you offer a time frame, or is it going to be a condition of the use variance approval? Is it going to be a condition of the site plan approval? I think the board and the public's concerned, is there a safety issue, and when's it going to be addressed? Because quite frankly, I think there's probably some people who say, why wouldn't you, for your own use, make sure the damn thing's safe? So is there a time frame within which, if the board acts affirmatively tonight on a use variance application, that these permits or inspections would be applied for?
Yeah, I think that they would be able to be applied for, because then we would have a zoning permit, and the building department would issue it. But like I said, we have had all these issues discussed at length at the municipal court proceeding, and there is a report where they went out and looked at everything. So, I mean, these issues are being addressed, and I know Mr. Paporo, who was, adamant about it, he was actually finally agreeable, and it took us a long time to get there. And he actually thought we should be going to the planning board, but it's like, no, we have the wrestling school is on the property, so we're still before the zoning board.
And as you're certainly aware, the board is not privy, nor should it be privy to the municipal court proceedings. If there are reports that are submitted there that we feel would address some of these issues, I would ask that you submit them to this board.
No, absolutely, we definitely will do that.
And just to add and clarify, the purpose of getting the use variance is the applicant does not have the ability to apply for building permits and all the subcode and inspect it properly by the fire officials under the subcodes, because it is not a use that is permitted. Should the board be granting approval, that would allow the applicant, and the applicant would be able to now apply for permits and have it properly inspected by the proper subcodes. Right now, the applicant doesn't have the ability to do that.
What may also,
The applicant certainly intends to apply for building permits. That would be where an approval would lead to.
Okay, catch 22. Is the tent being used now?
The tent is currently being used.
Okay? Now, according to Cox, a variance can be sought for a limited duration, provided assurance that the proposed use is not an ever-expanding, never-ending one. So we should have something from you people when this is going to end.
You know, that's
And
absolutely,
and how long can a tent stay there and not be asked to be taken down? It's a temporary-
Dr. Hofstein, I was just going to make that point. Both regarding Mr. Peters' comment and in a different way, Dr. Hofstein, a lot of the issues around this application seem to have to do with timing. Because you're asking the board to approve a temporary set of circumstances, and then there's going to be something left. And it's also, you're asking the board to sort of bless a non-conforming, unpermitted structure that is operational currently. So there are timelines there. So the maximum extent, obviously, you are the master of your case, but the extent to which you can address some of those time issues, I think, is going to be critical for the board to be able to feel comfortable with the application at all.
no, understood, and that's a great question and something that we obviously are prepared to answer. We have gotten the approval from the planning board, and we are close to resolution compliance, but we all know how that can go sometimes. So as soon as we can start construction, we're ready to go. And we would anticipate that once we have the building permit in hand, which should be at the latest in the spring, it would take somewhere between 12 and 18 months to build the new shul. So if we were to play it safe, you would say within 2 years, or you could even say, as soon as you get the CO from the new shul, you would cease the operations there. Either a specific timeline or a timeline connected to the CO of the new shul. But the goal is to go, obviously, to the new shul as soon as they can.
And I had asked a question previous to this about commercial use on a residential property. Could somebody speak to that?
Well, we actually believe, we have a planner here, and we believe that this would fit under your quasi-public use, which is permitted in the R3 zone.
Okay, now, 244-129, quasi-public and private club recreation. The buildings and recreation areas, including clubhouse, parks, playgrounds, tennis courts, swimming pools, and other such activities may be permitted as a conditional use in those zones specified. So you're asking this to be the primary use.
Well, no, it's a primary conditional use. That's correct.
That's primary conditional.
Yeah,
I mean,
the
that's
condition,
an oxymoron.
well, actually, the conditional use aspect doesn't go to whether it's a primary or accessory. It's a use that's permitted if those conditions are met, or obviously if this board decides to grant a variance. The question of the principal or accessory use is not necessarily tied to whether it's a permitted or a conditional use.
So basically, we almost don't have any principal use because the shul is temporary. So when that goes away, you're eliminating one principal use. And now you're thinking of allowing a commercial use to be.
Well, that is
principal
the
use of something else.
application.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, I said that is the application, that the shul would be the principal, a principal use, and the. Right, an evaporating
So you could give it temporary.
where use, and that, if I understand the application correctly, that the wrestling school would also be a principal use. So Jennings, I don't know if you want to address this now or at some other point, but obviously the board has real questions, and I think part of it may be that while the shul is there, I understand why you're thinking of the single-family home as an accessory use, because you're thinking of it as a parsonage accessory to the shul, but that is currently the principal use on this property. correct? The single-family home.
We might want to have our planner answer all those questions. But I think we would probably want to hear from our traffic guy first and then let him do his testimony.
I just have a couple of more questions, so let me just go through these. Basically, it turns out, how can the school now be a home occupation when the rabbi has nothing to do with the wrestling school unless wrestling is part of his religious teachings? It's just, enlighten me on that.
Again, that's really a question for the planner, and we agree with you. It's not a home occupation if the owner of the wrestling school no longer lives on the site. But that's been something that's been going on for at least 5 years.
What's the difference? It's going on, but it doesn't mean it's right.
Right, and that's why we're here trying to
It means you just...
get all the uses that are currently on the site legitimized.
Well, it appears that you're forced into making a decision coming before the board because everything's been before the court for God knows how long. So, whatever. I don't know if Mr. Peters has any comments on that.
I'd like to reserve until I hear from the professional planner so that I can cross-examine him about
Okay.
the history. I understand your train of thought, but at this point, while Mr. Halpert and Ms. Jennings have put lots of words on the record, I don't think they're the professional planner for the purposes of our record, and I want to hear from the professional planner before we start talking about what came first, the chicken or the egg. Madam Chair, if I might, I do have one question or comment. Ms. Jennings, in Mr. Halpert's testimony, he made a statement that the bulk variances were to be subsumed within the use variance. I will tell you, to start off, I disagree, because some of the things aren't permitted, and we're not here for site plan.
Yeah, and
We assume that you're,
I would agree with you, but he's not, he wasn't testifying as a planner.
Okay.
I didn't correct him.
you have a
I
court
figured-
reporter here, so I want to make sure that from our side, we have that correct.
Correct,
That
'cause
it's not your opinion yet that the bulk variance should be subsumed within the use variance that's being requested.
No, because the use variance that's being requested has to do with the wrestling school, not with the house of worship.
Thank you.
Mr. Hudak, just use your microphone because they can't hear you.
So, this application has been carried from 3/6/24 to 5/1/24 to 8/7/24 to 12/4/24 and January 15th of 2025, and now again tonight. So this is the 6th meeting that this has been on our schedules. And looking out here, I don't see any residents. I don't see any neighbors that are here. So I think that they have lost sight of this project and have no idea what's going on because...
Well,
no
actually,
additional-
I renoticed for this
Excuse me,
hearing.
I'm speaking, I wasn't done yet. So no additional notice was asked to be provided, and I'm not comfortable with that I believe that our next meeting for this application, that all the residents within, however far it is, should be notified of these hearings.
Okay, so if you had let me speak, I would have told you I noticed for this hearing. So everybody was given new notice because I realized there was an issue with the very first notice because it was based on the old ordinance. And so I wrote a letter to your board attorney and Mr. Peters and said, hey, you know what? I think we have to have a new planner's report and everyone take a new look at this. And I re-noticed for this hearing. So the fact that nobody's here doesn't mean they're not, they got the notice.
Were the residents notified?
Yes, everybody under the MLUL, everybody within 200 feet had to be given notice, and we put notice in the newspaper. So we have properly noticed this hearing.
Is that correct? I just want to make sure that everybody has been informed and has an opportunity to come here and listen and say their piece.
May I approach?
Sure.
I have the notice in front of me. I would ask that either through Dawn, or if not, we'll reach out to you, Ms. Jennings, because I'd like to have the notice be obviously part of the record, and including the list that was obtained and to whom it was sent. Mr. Hudak, would you like to take a look at the notice yourself, or have me read it to the record?
I just want to be assured that the notice went out to all the residents within 200 feet of this property.
From what I'm looking at now, it appears that it did indeed go out to everyone and does list the request for use variances, bulk variances, the conditional use variance, changing from the home occupation for the wrestling school,
And how
and
many notices, how many people?
Ms. Jennings, is this the list?
That's a list. And I just want to, for the record, that not only was it overnighted to Dawn, but we emailed it to her on Monday, and she acknowledged it and said, thank you. And I have her email if you want to look at it. So Dawn has it.
It looks about between 24 and 25. Yes. Oh, okay.
They were mailed out for this hearing this evening.
Yes. Wednesday, March 5th, 2025, at 7 PM.
Oh, great, okay. Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, and I can see some of the names are the same. I'm not going to go through that all fully now. All right.
And my point was
Yeah.
that one of the hearings, I think the first hearing, we had quite a few people here, quite a few neighbors, and they were offering testimony, and now we have nobody.
We never started, so I don't know what testimony they offered. And the first few times, we were carried because you guys just didn't get to us on the agenda. So I came here many times, waiting, and never got heard.
Right, so, Ms. Jennings, I'm going to and ask you to take this back. As I said, well, I'll check with Dawn tomorrow, make sure that the board has it, and if not, reach out to you for additional copies.
Any additional questions by the board for Mr. Halpert? Mr. Peters, I know you said you wanted to wait. Mr. Romeyer, you have any comments, questions now?
Yes. Can, Mr. Halper, can you just confirm, are there any other structures on the property that weren't discussed?
We discussed all the structures, including the trailers.
Okay. And then can you clarify, portions of the drive aisles are proposed to be pavement and portions are gravel. In your opinion, is the circulation adequately designed to accommodate the entire use of the property?
Yes, it is my opinion the circulation, as designed, will accommodate the parking requirements.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Any additional questions by the board for Mr. Halpert?
Just one. What happens, okay, if, once the shul is built and this is no longer being used, what is the plan with the tent? There's a concrete pad that was poured, HVAC equipment and so forth. What's the plan?
The plan is to remove and demolish everything associated with the tent is the plan.
Ms. Jennings, would you like to call your next witness?
Yeah, at this time, I'd like to call up John Ray, our traffic engineer.
Ms. Ray, do you swear that the testimony that you will provide to this board will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth? I do. And please state your name and credentials for the record.
John Ray, REA, a professional engineer with McDonough and Ray Associates, dealing with traffic this evening.
Mr. Ray, this board accepts your credentials.
Thank you.
Mr. Ray, as you're aware, this is just a use variance application at the time, but we did engage your services to make sure that the site access, circulation, and parking would be able to accommodate the uses. So I would ask you your professional opinion, if you could address each of those topics.
Sure. And in order to address those topics, we did do several things. First of all, I went out to the site to establish the existing roadway and traffic conditions in the area. Jackson Pines Road is a pretty quiet rural road. We also collected some traffic volume data during the morning services, which are the more heavily attended services. As Mr. Halpert testified on
I don't think your mic is on. At least that's what. Can you just check that? That's what the professional here is telling me.
Sorry, should I start over again? No? Okay. So we went out and we conducted traffic counts at the site access to Jackson Pines Road during the morning services at the shul. And basically, over that 3-hour period that the services are held from 6:30 to 9:30 in the morning, 6:30 to 9 actually, we recorded 19 cars going onto the property and 19 cars coming off the property over that 2.5-hour period. The vehicles interacted with the traffic flow on Jackson Pines Road without incurring any significant delay. The two-way traffic volumes on Jackson Pines Road during the peak hour in the morning were 47 vehicles, so there was little to no delay associated with the vehicles getting onto and off the property. This is in the existing condition. I also took a look at the use variance plan that Mr. Halpert has put up and we have discussed, he's discussed this evening. I think the plan does provide for adequate circulation, adequate parking. We can meet the ordinance requirements with respect to the parking for the different uses. And as Mr. Halpert indicated, if we're fortunate enough to get a use variance approval and come back for site plan, we do believe that some discussion with respect to the overall need for parking on the site should be had with respect to perhaps not constructing all of the parking and banking some of the parking that we do not believe we will need. Because we do have the different uses, the wrestling school, the shul. They generally do not operate during the same hours, so there may be an opportunity, should we get the use variance, to discuss banking some of the parking when we get the site plan. And that about sums it up.
That's all the direct questions I have.
What time is prayer in the evening?
9 to 10:30. And there is a little bit of an overlap. Those are not the more heavily attended services. The wrestling school does shut down at 9:30, if I'm not mistaken. 8, okay, so there's no overlap with the wrestling school.
Any questions for Mr. Ray?
Yeah, Madam Chair?
Mr. Peters?
Mr. Ray, I got the impression from Mr. Halpert that there was a request for a waiver or variance for parking as part of this application. Your testimony is that the applicant's not requesting relief from the parking standards as part of the use variance and will provide testimony and that request for relief if necessary at the site plan? Just want the record to be clear.
Correct, yes.
Okay. So you agree that the parking standards are X, you're providing Y, and if and when you come back for site plan, there'll be testimony with regard to that relief if it's required.
Yes.
Thank you, that's all I have.
Ms. Jennings, would you like to call your next witness?
Yeah, I'm actually going to call up Steve Rivera, who is the operator of the wrestling school, since there were a couple of questions we were not able to answer. Just turned it on.
Magic touch.
Ms. Rivera?
Good evening.
Hi, could you raise your right hand, please? And do you swear that the testimony that you will provide to this board will be the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
I do.
And could you state your name and explain your connection to this application?
Sure. My name's Steve Rivera. I am the wrestling school that's been talked about today, Elite Wrestling, and I am the owner-operator.
Okay, thank you, and could you take that microphone back?
Hello? Yep. Hi.
It's just easier to hear you.
Okay. Can I start with just thanking you guys? In 2009, I was in front of Mr. Hudak and many others, and I just want to say thank you for the last 16 years. It's been just amazing. The opportunity to impact the kids like I have, to be able to travel the world with Frankie Edgar, my UFC world champion, and to experience my son winning a bronze medal at this past year's Olympics. And that would have never happened if you guys didn't grant me this stuff 16 years ago. So thank you so much. So much. All right, so now, the history. All right, the history of us is, yeah, I own the house. I want to also say that if I knew this was tied to my ownership, I don't know if we'd be even here today. Because I didn't realize that, because I've gotten along with the rabbi so well for almost 10 years now that I never even considered, if I knew that there was a chance that I would lose my variance, I read that thing, and I'm not an attorney, but I didn't see, and I didn't realize it until I spoke to her, and she's like, yeah, usually it's based on you living on the property, and I'm like,
Well,
wow.
that's good. It was a home occupation.
Yeah, but I signed the lease, so I thought that just kept me in the game. And then I'm sorry for not knowing more, all right? And I just wanted to say thank you for that. But the history is I stay within my realm. I don't push it. I'm just thankful to have it. The neighbors and everyone, no one being here, sir, that's because we all get along. And honestly, I even have a class in my school now for the rabbis, people, like the pedestrians of their thing, for self-defense and stuff, that I felt like they should have it in today's world, and we offered it to them, and they took it. So they're great people. They really mean well. They've been great to me and giving me this lease, and I think that if this all can work out temporarily for them, it will help me make it longer, like as long as we agree. They don't plan on kicking me out, I hope, you know? So, as long as I can make them, or as they can be happy doing what they do, hopefully I can continue doing what I do.
Dr. Hofstein, did you have questions for Mr. Rivera?
I think everything you've done is great, and the important thing is we're a land use board, a zoning board, and we have to follow the zoning ordinances of the town, and that's what our job is. So we'll see how it works out.
I understand. And just one more thing. Those Jackson Jag girls this year, state champs. I train a lot of them, all right? Just get that out there, all right? Again, thanks for hearing me, and thank you for the opportunity. The last 16 years has just been amazing.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
Mr. Rivera, a couple things. First, I'm looking through the old resolution from 2009. You brought Scott Winston and Scott Goodell with you in 2009. Nice company.
Some of my best company, honestly.
But, so the record's clear. It's a home occupation. It said that you're not going to employ any other employees except folks that are residents of your house.
Yeah.
So once you sold it, you lost some rights, so to speak. So the idea that someone else owns it, it can't be considered a home occupation, because the person who lives in the home doesn't run the wrestling business. So while I can't fault you for not knowing municipal land use law inside and out, and we don't think that was done for any reason other than you selling the property, it is an issue, because now your business is not considered a home occupation. It's going to be treated differently from a planning perspective. We're going to hear from the applicant's witness shortly. So we don't think there was anything purposeful, but I want you to understand that when you came in and said, well, I'm going to run a, if you're going to sell magazines out of your house, you're going to put a wrestling school in the back. We're all glad you did. But you don't live there anymore, so you can't call it a home occupation anymore. That's all.
But is there
But
any?
But we're damn glad you're there.
Yeah, and I appreciate you all, but I also, like, this is part of my living. So that's what kind of concerns me a little as well, is that the wrestling school, I've been in business a long time, and, well, it's not your problem, but that is a concern of mine, all right? And the fact that we're only open 6-7 hours a day to go get a retail space to do this stuff just doesn't work, you know, like in a real manner. So I understand where we're at, and I will do my best to be what I got to be for you guys, and whatever happens,
Mr. Rivera, I understand that the board has to look at the use and the structure, not so much at you, because if they're approving it, it's, you know, it's not a home occupation, which honestly was tied to you in some regard. Now it would be a question of allowing that commercial use and that structure. And if you decided to take your skills elsewhere, that would still be something that existed. So that's something the board has to consider.
Okay.
You don't have any problem, so Mr. Halbert pointed out that your hours end at 8:30 and prayer usually starts at 9:30, so there's usually not
There's never.
cross-traffic. I'm trying to think of the right words, but.
Yeah, but there is and honestly, me and Eli, the rabbi, we communicate. So when there is, sometimes they have just different religious things they have to do, and they communicate with me, and we always make it work. Like I said, we've been working together for years at this point, and we have great respect for each other.
Yep, I have a whole bunch of questions, but I think you answered a whole bunch of them already, so I
No,
think
that's
I'm
okay.
good.
I'm
Yeah,
here to
yeah, I
answer
think
them.
I'm
She
good.
told me I.
Let me just specifically, so you're now leasing the property, because you sold it, right?
I do.
Yep, and paying whatever they're charging you,
I
right?
do.
And the reason I ask is because you mentioned that this is your business, right?
And Mr. Rosenbaum
So
makes
you're
it possible for me to make it a business because he doesn't charge me like a retail person would.
Right, I understand. That's great, and it sounds like you're doing, it's great. But it just kind of comes back, so, you know, this is a residential area, what everybody's saying. I don't want commercial space, you know, or a business right next to my house. That's why I want to live in an R3, not commercial area. So you understand the issue, right?
But where we live, we have 5 acres. I have 5 acres. My neighbor has 10 acres. You know, there's not much around us per se. And my building, if you look at that my neighbor's house is 100 feet off the road. So like we are so far from each other, in all honesty. But like I understand your concern, and I completely see your point of view here, people. I do.
But thank you. You
I
answered
would
a lot
s-
of questions.
I would say this, though, it's a pole barn, so it's not like you're looking at a daycare or a business, you know what I mean? It could be a garage in his backyard,
Yeah.
I guess is what I'm saying. And as, all the time I've been on the board, we have people put up pole barns to store their antique cars or things like that. So I understand, I'm kind of struggling with that myself.
Right.
I get it, the change, because he doesn't live there, but it doesn't look like a business.
And we'll see, and maybe perhaps the applicant could consider if we could, there's some conditions that would not survive the departure of Mr. Rivera and the end of his business, and we could perhaps think about that.
I appreciate you all again. Thank you.
Thank you. We have about 5 minutes, Ms. Jennings. Did you want to call your next witness? Do you want to wait till we reschedule? What are your thoughts here?
Well, the last witness is the planner. I'm not sure how long he's going to take or how many questions that you're going to have.
My guess is that there's going to be more than 5 minutes worth of testimony and questions. I obviously can't speak for the board and Mr. Peters, but, you know, that's really up to the board. I'm going to say, looking at the board, that maybe this is it for tonight. I do. Really, really able to read that body language, especially down at the end of the day. Ms. Jennings, I don't think it's,
And that's fine. Look, it's kind of a very unique case, so there's a lot that's been said, and I think maybe if everybody gets a refresh and we come back and the planner can do his testimony, and hopefully everybody will have their questions and we will be able to answer them, and you can vote.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, could you open it to the public for the other witnesses so they don't have to come back?
good thinking, yes.
That was Mr. Ray, I can't even take credit for that.
Thank you, Mr. Ray. Yes.
Well, I wanted to wait to see what we all agreed to do to carry it. So, yes, at this point, I'm going to open it to the public. If anyone wishes to come forward and speak about what you heard tonight, please do so at this time.
And specifically, if they have any questions for the witness, Mr. Halpert, Mr. Ray?
Seeing no one come forward, I'm going to close public session. We need to find a date for when they were going to come back.
We do, and I am not the date finder. Turn over to Gina.
I don't know that we have a date finder, but we may have some time all the way at the end of the March 19th meeting, perhaps. I'm not sure if we will or we won't. There's no guarantee. If you want guarantees, you got to pick a different month.
Yeah, that's not going to work for me. I'm going to be in Woodbridge on March 19th.
Okay.
Oh, I thought you were going to say something fun like Aruba.
I know.
She said that, so matter of fact, I was like, Woodbridge.
Yeah. Okay, have a good time. And additionally, maybe having a little more time, because it would be helpful to have those reports on the fire issues and, yeah.
We're into May because the April meeting has Swanborn, the animal rescue, and a variance.
Yeah.
April 16th has phases 3 and 4 of Adventure Crossing, a home occupation, and Tracy Place, the application that got carried this evening. So you're up to the first meeting in May, which would be May 7th, I think, and that's where we were going to put JCP&L if we wanted to give this applicant the first hour and do JCP&L after that, just because I think we can get done, and I don't mind having planners debates, but I don't think it's all night. Otherwise, we already carried another we carried the application this evening to the second meeting in May.
Right.
And so I don't get smacked in the parking lot. I know that sarcasm never looks good on a transcript.
It's
But we also have
enduring problem for me.
we also have 7 fence applications that we haven't scheduled, that we're going to have to either work in or have a special meeting just for resident applications. So, but now we have 7 of them.
I don't know what the,
hour on May
yeah.
7th. So I'm going to turn to you, Ms. Jennings. How long do you think your planner will take? Do you think we could do it in an hour?
Oh, we could wrap it up in,
He's
absolutely.
shaking his head vigorously, yes. So then I would agree with Mr. Peters on May 7th if looks like we're going to have JCP&L, if we split the time or, have the first hour, whatever, this
Yeah.
application, and then schedule JCP&L as the second application. And if you have a quick fence, they could be first. 1.
All right, so then the application is carried to May 7th, no additional notice required.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. Motion to adjourn, all in favor? Aye. That's it.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure who made that motion and seconded, but I feel sure it was somebody.